Hello, everyone. My name is Father Von Jocklin. I'm a missionary in the United States. Today is Saturday of the 5th week in Ordinary Time, and our Gospel is from St. Mark. In those days, when there was again a great crowd without anything to eat, Jesus summoned the disciples and said, "My heart is moved with pity for the crowd, because they have been with me now for 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them away hungry to their homes, they will collapse on the way. And some of them have come a great distance." His disciples answered him, "Where can anyone get enough bread to satisfy them here in this deserted place?" Still he asked them, "How many loaves do you have?" They replied, 7. He ordered the crowd to sit down on the ground. Then, taking the 7 loaves, he gave thanks, broke them, and gave them to his disciples to distribute. And they distributed them to the crowd. They also had a few fish. He said the blessing over them, and ordered them be distributed also. They ate and were satisfied. They picked up the fragments left over, 7 baskets. There were about 4,000 people. He dismissed the crowd and got into the boat with his disciples, and came to the region of Dalmanatha. Like all the other miracles our Lord performed in his public ministry, the feeding of the 4,000 we heard today is more than merely a solution to a temporal problem. It is a revelation that teaches us about Christ's personal solicitude for us, about his universal mission, and also foreshadows a greater miracle that will be seen later by his disciples. St. Augustine tells us the miracles performed by our Lord Jesus Christ are divine works which lead the human mind to the knowledge of God through visible things. His miracles are divine works which lead us to the knowledge of God through visible things. The setting in which this miracle occurs is no coincidence. The desert is part of the pedagogy. The wilderness is reminiscent of the trials Israel underwent in the book of Exodus. It is a place where God's providence is made known when human weakness encounters divine abundance. So whenever we are in the desert with Jesus, we can expect a revelation that the Lord will teach us. And in this moment in the gospel is no exception. The first revelation of this moment is about the heart of Jesus. St. Mark records Jesus telling his apostles, "My heart is moved with pity for the crowd." Notice that Jesus does not wait for the people to ask. Rather, he sees and anticipates their need, and he himself takes the initiative. "I have compassion on the crowd because they have been with me now for 3 days and have nothing to eat." And the Greek word here, describing how Jesus feels in this moment, means a deep, gut-wrenching compassion. And this is the same word used when Jesus sees the widow of Nain, and when he sees the crowds who, he says, were like lost sheep without a shepherd. St. John Paul II, in his encyclical Dives Misericordia, points out that Christ's mercy is not passive pity, but it is an active love that seeks to restore and nourish. The location of this miracle in the Decapolis, which was a Gentile region, also demonstrates the mission of Jesus extends beyond the Jewish people, that his mission is universal. So this is the first lesson for us as members of the church, as members of Christ's body. We must have this same compassion and heartfelt mercy for all mankind who suffers physical and spiritual hunger. And in imitation of Christ, we must have this heart for all men, that they would be able to feed their souls on Christ. Returning to the gospel, we see that despite witnessing the feeding of 5,000 just 2 chapters earlier, the disciples still ask with disbelief, "Where can anyone get enough bread to satisfy all these people here in the wilderness?" The disciples were slow in understanding and weak in their faith. As St. Bede says, they measured divine power by human capability. And perhaps this mirrors our own struggles, how often we, like the disciples, forget God's intervention in our past, and we doubt his ability to sustain us. So Jesus chooses this moment of doubt and weakness to reveal his power, to provide for his followers. He reveals his authority, first of all, that he has over creation itself. In this instance, Jesus, we see, does not ask God for bread as a prophet like Elijah might have done. Instead, he takes the loaves and multiplies them with his own power, showing that he himself has authority over creation. And secondly, as proof that God not only meets our needs, but is more than we could want, Christ multiplies the bread to the point of 7 baskets of leftovers. As St. Paul would say to the Ephesians, God is able to do far more abundantly than all we ask or think. So the limit of God's communicating his love and grace to us is not his own power, but it is our own limitation. As Saint Therese of Lisieux said, we receive from God in proportion to what we expect from him. And she uses the example of a small tumbler or a large jug that, being filled, they contain different amounts of water. In the same way, God's grace fills the soul, but according to the capacity of each. Finally, we see this miracle as foreshadowing the Eucharist. And this is seen by the way that the story parallels the Last Supper, where Jesus instituted the Eucharist. St. Mark here says that Jesus took the 7 loaves, and having given thanks, broke them and gave them to his disciples. First, Jesus took the bread, blessed it, then broke it and gave it. So this is the same fourfold sequence that we see in the Last Supper, where Christ took bread and having blessed it, broke it and gave it to them. And we see again in the Gospel of Luke how after the resurrection, the disciples recognized Jesus in this same formula of giving thanks, of breaking of the bread. And finally, in the Mass, throughout the centuries, even to today, the priest, in the person of Christ, takes, consecrates, breaks, and gives the Eucharist to the faithful. So just as Jesus provided for the crowd in the wilderness, showing his power, showing his universal mission, showing his love and compassion for all mankind, he now provides for us, continues to provide for us, and with the exception and the difference that in the Eucharist, Christ is not merely giving bread, he is giving us himself. He gives himself as the living bread, who alone can satisfy the deepest longings of the human heart.
If you found this video fruitful, please feel free to share it with a friend or family member. Or if you would like to learn more about our missionary priests throughout the world and how to support them, please visit iveamerica.org. Thank you for watching, and God bless.